When I was 15, we read the Canterbury Tales for English class. The Canterbury Tales are a collection of stories written by Geoffrey Chaucer in the late 1300s. And they were written in Middle English, which sounded a lot more like other Germanic languages, such as Dutch or German, than modern English does. And many of the tales were bawdy and sexual in nature, since they were supposed to each be a competitive contest entry by different villagers as the larger story goes. And they all had a title like The Miller's Tale, The Cook's Tale, The Physician's Tale. So our teacher assigned us to each write our own Canterbury Tale. And I entitled mine The Smog-Eaters Tale for some reason. And I actually found the first draft of it, and I'm going to read it to you now. And you might be surprised that a 15-year-old wrote and turned this story in to their English teacher. The Smog-Eaters Tale. There once was a proud paper boy with no short-term memory who was in love with a woman on his route. Every day, he would look for a sign that would lead to new knowledge of her. He was always able to remember what he learned of her except for her name. One morning, he saw a strange potted plant on her porch, which he did not remember seeing before. He looked for her name on his list, as he had to do this every day to refresh his memory. Keely Vala. He went on her porch to place the paper perfectly in the center of her doorstep. He threw all of the other papers from the street as he rode by on his bicycle, but Keely deserved better. Therefore, he would see to it that that was all she would ever receive. As he was leaving her porch, he stopped to examine the new plant. The plant was very strange indeed. Green and purple lobes protruded from its base, and it was redolent of sex. He touched a lobe, and his hand began to tremble as a warm liquid puddled onto his fingertips. He grinned inquisitively, rubbed the substance into his palm, and continued on his way. To his dismay, he remembered her name as he went about his day. This was definitely a telling sign for him, and he knew he should talk to her the next day. Bright and early, he set out on his route and anticipated his meeting with Keely. He knew she was at least 10 years older than he, but he loved her so. Her long blonde hair, her painfully bright blue eyes, her round, seductive pink lips. Just one kiss of those lips, he was sure, would satisfy him forever. He stepped onto her red tile porch and rang the doorbell. She came to the door in her maroon terry bathrobe and looked confusedly at the handsome 15-year-old boy on her doorstep. Good morning, Miss Bella. My name is Juza Riso, and let me get right to the point. I am completely in love with you and would like to ask for your hand in marriage. The silence that followed included frantic thoughts from both parties. Juza reeled in the insolence and bluntness of his proposal. He could have asked her to coffee or something first. Keely mostly laughed at the boy for such a ridiculous request, but in the back of her mind considered it. She was somewhat desperate because men always left her after learning of her flaw, and maybe now she would get the paper for free. Keely accepted finally, and the two announced their engagement to their families, who were of course ardently warm and accepting of their union. One day, on a walk along the riverbank, the fiancés decided to tell each other all of their secrets. "I have no short-term memory," Juza began, "but my love for you allows me to remember everything about you." "Well, my flaw is less conveniently solved," Keeley said hesitantly. "I have no genitalia. Men always leave me when they find out." "That's okay," responded Juza. He was somewhat disappointed, but loved her so much it didn't make a difference, just like Grisella loved Walter. He at least still had her lips to kiss. He did just this, and they walked back to Keeley's house. When they reached her porch, they gasped at the sight before them. Keeley's plant had disappeared, and in its place was a ginkgo biloba. Keeley started to walk towards it and felt a strange sensation in her crotch. She reached her hand into her pants, and lo and behold, she had a vagina. She announced this to Juza, and he grinned maniacally. "Huh," he said, munching the ginkgo sprig. "I suppose love conquers all flaws." "Well, yes, and your love has proven to surpass the test," Keeley said as she picked up the old red and green plant she had hidden behind the porch swing. So this was a long time ago that I turned this in, and I wonder if things have changed a lot since I was in high school. My other classmates and we often wrote things that were kind of sexual like this, or even more so than this one was. And I wonder what our teachers really thought about it. And at that age, it always seemed like a lot of older people were really uptight about these things, and surely some were, but being older now and imagining if a teenage student handed me this paper, it seems more like maybe they weren't uptight in general in their lives, but they just really wanted to protect kids' innocence and would react to what they deemed inappropriate for them, and so therefore they seemed uptight to the students. But what do you think? Do you think things have changed?